Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. Today we have a multi-continental podcast because we have Ryan Jones, and he is from another continent now. When I met Ryan, we were studying for our NABCEP, and they used to call it the PV Installer exam. Now it's called the PV Installation Professional exam, but we were doing it back in the day when it had a different name. They had all these different NABCEP certifications. Solar was a lot smaller time back then, and a lot of solar companies were two guys in a pickup truck, and you had to learn everything. So that's why they called it an installer certification instead of like a design certification and a commissioning and maintenance certification, all those things that they do right now. So Ryan Jones then got his NABCEP certification, and he went off to get a job with Solyndra in Europe. So how's that Solyndra job doing, Ryan?
Well, as you probably know, Lyra has long since blown up. I think they blew up at the end of 2011.
Well, I believe in resurrections. So one thing that was funny is after Solyndra went down, and it was like, a lot of people don't even remember what Solyndra was, but they made these like cool solar tubes. And then it was like the thing at the solar conference that everybody would be standing around their booth because it's so cool. Or somebody would have a Solyndra panel at their booth. And then it was like around 2008 time, and it was like Obama was promoting Solyndra, and Department of Energy gave Solyndra some loans. And then what happened is the Chinese solar industry lowered the price so much nobody could compete, and Solyndra went out of business a little bit. But anyway, I got this Solyndra t-shirt, and I would wear it to the Solar Power International conferences, which is now called RE+. And I would be like, yeah, I'm with Solyndra. People would all laugh and stuff like that. Then me and my friend, we were going to like find one of those booths where somebody doesn't show up and it's just an empty booth and they paid for it. And we were going to set up a fake Solyndra booth and maybe like spray paint some fluorescent light bulbs and say, yeah, we're back.
If you want to do that, I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm in.
I thought that would have been fun. But then I was wearing that shirt to a screening for the Colbert Report. So before, it was like, that was my favorite Stephen Colbert thing, was the Colbert Report. And he was a fake conservative commentator. And so I wore my Solyndra shirt, and then he was warming up on the crowd before they started taping. And I got up and I said some question. He's like, wait a minute, what's with that shirt? And I was like, I believe that Solyndra will be the corporate second coming because of corporate personhood. And he was like, he pointed to his security guards and he's like, get him out of here. He's just joking. I got to stay for the whole show. But that was my experience having a conversation with Stephen Colbert during a live, show. So it was cool.
That's great. I had a guy, one of the process engineers contacted me back in 2017, and he was really intent on resurrecting Solyndra. He had purchased, I think, a lot of their patents, which are probably all but useless, but he was really intent on reviving the basic geometry. As you said, they were like fluorescent bulbs. They had 40 fluorescent bulb-shaped SIGs, thin film tubes on a rigid aluminum frame, and they sat flat on a rooftop, which the idea was that there was a few inches of space in between each of the tubes. And the idea was that the light bounces down off of a white roof, which was a big initiative back then. And then you got the effect on the backside of the tube as well. So you got basically the same amount of energy, but a higher energy as you did from a flat plate silicon panel. But you had higher density because you could sit everything flat and mechanically connect all of the panels directly together. So there was basically a GCR of 100%.
Yeah, I remember having somebody contact me, and he was trying to resurrect Solyndra. Maybe, I have a feeling it might have been the same guy.
Might have been.
And he was trying to bring it back. And then I think he was trying to put crystalline silicon inside the tubes.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So it must have been
exactly
the same guy.
the idea. Yeah.
I can't remember his name. He'd be fun to get on the podcast. If you remember, let me know and I'll get hold of them.
Yeah.
And yeah, those were pretty cool. And then the air would flow through the tubes. So it wasn't like a sail from a sailboat. So it would stay on the roof with less ballast or no ballast weight.
Yeah, they didn't have
And
any ballast.
yeah, the air would cool it off. And it was SIGs, which copper, indium, gallium diselenide, I guess is what SIGs is. It's like a thin film that's not very popular
Selenium.
right now. And then,
Yeah.
and but it was less efficient, but then you get like the bouncing off the roof and all that kind of stuff. Then another thing that I remembered about them is technically one tube was considered a module. So the whole thing was considered a panel. So then when people were
That's
saying
right.
solar
Yeah,
panels,
each
they
one of
actually
the
had
40
it.
tubes were connected in parallel, so you had a high voltage as you do with most of the thin films. But anyways, it was a really interesting time, an interesting company to work for. Things were changing really fast back in that period. I think we had, starting out in 2007 or so, I think the total capacity, installed capacity in the world in 2007 was somewhere around 10 gigawatts. And right now we have somewhere around, just to give others in the audience an idea of where the solar industry has come since 2007. The current capacity sits somewhere around 2.2 terawatts.
Yeah.
So it's a
So
very different world back then.
2,200 from 10. Like that's a big jump. So it's cool that we were getting in doing solar back in those days, and we've seen that kind of growth. I remember too, it was just people were like, someday we're going to be 1% of the electricity on the grid. And people were just like, yeah, you're dreaming. 1% of the electricity on the grid. Now it's the least expensive electricity there is. So it's pretty cool to have seen that transition happen and to been there in the industry while it happened.
Yeah, agreed. It was quite a ride. I think back in those days too, they called it the solar coaster. I don't know if that,
Oh, sure.
if that term still holds as much relevance as it did back then.
We're doing some solar coastering right now, especially with like the Trump administration coming in and changing all of the Inflation Reduction Act and all that kind of stuff. So it's
Yeah.
woo, and then
Yeah.
we'll crank it back up, and we keep getting higher and higher.
Yeah.
You just have to
Yeah.
zoom out.
That's right. I think, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger.
Yeah, I know. Like
I don't think Trump will manage to kill the solar industry. He may
yeah,
set us back a bit, but
yeah.
come back
Like
even stronger, I'm sure.
even if you look at the first Trump administration, the solar industry like grew like multiple times over, even in the U.S. And it's just you just got to zoom out. And even when you go back to like whatever it was, like 2008, that's when Obama got elected, so he wasn't sworn in until 2009. So we had Bush, the oil guy from Texas, and all that kind of stuff. Solar was growing many times over when that happened. It just keeps growing no matter what they do. And during those times too, if you went back to, let's say we went back to those times, like 2007, 8, 9, all that kind of stuff, everybody in the industry was all depressed and going, oh, the whole industry is falling apart and we're not going to make it. And then look at us now, where it's like you said, we went from 10 gigawatts to 2,200 in the world. It's like you can't even count. 10 is like nothing compared to that. To 10 compared to 2,200 gigawatts, like that's some big increases. That's some big
Yeah, I
numbers.
think last year alone we put over 600 gigawatts of new solar capacity last year alone.
Yeah.
And you're
Wow.
talking all the way up to 2007, you only had 10 gigawatts.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's really,
I know we might have 10 gigawatt days. I don't know if that would be a good day or a bad day. And just when they interconnect them and stuff like that.
yeah,
But and China's really leading the way too, as far as making it happen and installing all those gigawatts, and all the other countries need to catch up. It's like probably something like half the solar in the world today that was installed today was installed in China, something like that.
yeah. They got the advantage of size over like Germany, who was the leader up until, I don't know, 2017 or something. They were
Yeah.
the world leader, as small as they are, a little country in Europe, 80
Uh,
million people or so, was the world leader in solar.
yeah, I remember around those times too, and I guess probably when you went over there because you're still in Spain. I think that's a really cool story too, how like you got your NABCEP certification and then you got a job and then they brought you to Europe and you're still there. So like the NABCEP certification, it took you to go live in some other country, which you obviously like, or you would just come back. And I bumped into you a couple of different times, just like walking around at the Smarter E, also known as Intersolar in Munich. And that's where I most recently saw you. I think that was in May. But it's pretty cool how that happened. And then I remember too, there was all this German feed-in tariff action. And that's what really kickstarted the solar industry. In fact, I had the guy on the show, Hans Joseph Fell, and he was on my podcast not too long ago. In fact, I met him, I think it was even right when I saw you. I think it might have been like did you see him when we were at the show together? Like all these people.
I did not, but I'm impressed you had him on your show. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think I saw him like, it might have been like within 10 minutes of running into you. I think it was like right around the same time that I ran into you at the show. And so he was really responsible for starting the solar industry as far as making it where it's feasible to do solar with the feed-in tariff. And so just to summarize what a feed-in tariff is, it's like the government makes a policy where the utility has to pay you a certain amount per kilowatt hour for 20 years. So if somebody signed up 19 years ago, they're still getting that same rate that they were getting 19 years ago for another year. Right. So that was pretty cool. And they set it up so it was a good investment to do solar. And half the solar industry was in Germany, but then Spain kind of copied it. And I think maybe Spain kept the same rates as Germany did, but in Spain, it was a lot sunnier. I can remember like getting solar modules I think it was in 2008. And we were designing projects and stuff like that. And I remember it was like DC Power. We were getting our PV modules from this organization called DC Power, which is now called Soligent. And I called up Preston and I was like, hey, we need some modules. They're like, man, we just shipped them all to Spain. And I was like, wait a minute, weren't those made in Spain? And he's like, yeah, they shipped them over here to sell them. But then that feed-in tariff was so good that they just shipped them back to Spain. And so Spain just took off like crazy. And I think they were installing stuff that wasn't good installs. It was like just they installed it so fast so they could get in that feed-in tariff at that certain rate to just get it in. And some of the things weren't installed safely or so they would last and stuff like that. And you probably were sent over there to clean some of those things up, or I don't know, Solyndra maybe not. And so I imagine there's still some of those projects operating that they're getting that old feed-in tariff rate. But then I remember something about like Spain did something wrong where like they had this feed-in tariff rate and then they knocked it down retroactively. Right. So everybody's like planning on what they're going to get and then they change their mind later.
That's right.
Yeah,
they promised. I mean, this is the problem back in, when I came to Europe in 2009 or so, and I, like you said, came originally to Germany working for Solyndra. And, it was a gold rush all over Europe. Every year, new countries would adopt a feed-in tariff rate. And these initial feed-in tariff rates usually started out very high. Sometimes I remember Greece had over 52 cents a kilowatt hour, guaranteed for 20 years. And then it would slowly decrease over time. The feed-in tariff would get lower and lower, as the idea being to originally incentivize companies and get the industry jump-started, and then would gradually go away over time. But it was a gold rush, 52 cents a kilowatt hour. You can do the math really quick and figure out, my God, I can make a fortune in putting up a solar plant. Even a small 100 kilowatt plant would pay for itself within a year. And then you had another 20 years of basically passive income. It was big money back then. And there was a lot of companies that just came into the scene very quickly. There was a lot of, that was part of the problem, because there was a lot of just construction companies who would get into solar overnight. And I think the quality of the solar installation suffered in a lot of places. Germany was a fairly mature market and they did things very smart. So they were one of the more mature markets and they tended to have very high quality installation. So it was a good place to learn. But I think the other countries, Spain may be included in that, it appeared overnight. The feed-in tariffs in 2007, 2008, I think, is when they really got going. And then it disappeared right around the time of the economic crisis here in 2010 or so. The government decided to roll back all of the feed-in tariffs. They went and promised, hey, we'll give you this rate for 20 years. And then they decided that they couldn't honor those promises. And that really hurt the industry in Spain for sure for quite a while. I think it's just starting to recover a bit here, where they're realizing now that the maturity of the industry, and like you said, the price of solar is the cheapest form of energy on the planet. So they want to incentivize again. But I think they're doing it a little more cautiously, and I think other companies are a little more cautious about investing. But, it was gold rush, and that was what really, in the early years allowed me to travel around Europe. Belgium was really hot for a while. The UK was hot. But these feed-in tariffs came and went really quickly. So you would have them 1 year, and the next year they decide they were going to lower it by half or by 75%. And so the next year everything would move to Italy. And then Italy had a big feed-in tariff, and all the business would go down there. And then you had all these qualifiers, different incentives for, like Solyndra, the building integrated. So they tried to get in on the whole greenhouse idea. It qualified for extra feed-in tariffs if they were building integrated. So that was interesting work as well. But yeah.
Do you have any advice for people that would want to do something like you, like to be nomadic or to be able to work while seeing the world like I do? But my trips are not that long. So a lot of times all I see is a hotel and place where I teach a class, something like that. Like I'll go to a faraway place and then I won't really explore a whole lot, but I try to get out there and stuff like that. But for you, you're living it right now. Like you've just taken like a 20-year trip or something, So
yeah, basically it's the way it feels anyways.
So do you got any pointers for something like that? So first you get like your NABCEP certification, maybe like an engineering degree would also help a lot. And then how do you get the work permits and all that kind of stuff?
It's tricky. There's a lot of challenges.
Are you an illegal alien?
I'm not. I have my visas, my main visa being my wife, who is German. So she's allowed me to get the visas fairly easy. But I went through many years of getting sponsored by other companies. So generally, if there's enough need for a specialty, and it does help to have an advanced degree, a master's degree or something, because it makes getting those visas a lot easier for the companies that sponsor you. But generally, working in the solar industry, depending on the market and where you're at, getting sponsorship is not terribly difficult. And most bigger companies are willing to do that with, have minimal cost to it. It's not easy to work in the solar industry as a kind of digital nomad. I think it's difficult because most of the jobs, at least up until COVID, were desk jobs in offices. I managed to find my way to Malaga, the south of Spain on the coast here, where I'm able to work from home fully remote, which gives me a lot of latitude, a lot of flexibility.
So you could be a digital nomad with all your latitude, hitting all the different degrees of latitude. Maybe what you should do is start off at the equator, and then just 60 nautical miles is a degree of latitude. So just every day go 1 degree north until you get to the North Pole. Just see what that's like working in all those different latitudes.
That sounds fun, man. I would, if I was 30 years younger, I'd definitely try that.
Yeah. Might get a little tricky up there with the polar bears and all that kind of stuff.
That's right. Watch out for those polar bears.
Yeah, especially since there's no land.
But you got the extra albedo from the white fur. It might give you a boost.
Yeah, those polar bears, that's why they invented bifacial, is to capture those polar bears' reflections.
The polar bear effect, the little known polar bear effect.
Yeah. But I could be a digital nomad to a certain degree. I am, but then...
Yeah, I think you got the right... Being a consultant is probably your best bet. And as far as being really independent, I think some of the jobs, it's easy these days. It's fairly easy to find, engineering or corporate jobs, doing desk jobs that are fully remote within the United States. Now, the dream would be getting a job in the US and then living in Spain.
Yeah.
and working fully remote. That doesn't work. Just FYI, I don't know anybody who's been able to pull that off. I did that for a short time, but this was a very special
Is that
circumstance.
because of the time zones or something, or
No, because of the tax implications there.
oh, the
Most
tax?
companies will not, I haven't found any companies, even the companies that are fully remote within the US, that would let you work even more than like 30% of your time outside of the country, because there are some tax implications for them. If they don't have an office in the country where you are located, they are by default implied for taxes in that country if one of their employees is located there.
So I have a good friend that's in Europe, like he's a European, and he just doesn't tell his company what country he's in.
Yeah, you can try all of those kind of things.
And he does good
there are
work,
probably
and
people that can get away
sometimes,
with it, but
yeah, he sometimes is in like places. He likes to go to Costa Rica and stuff like that, and he does have to have some strange hours, you
that's
know?
right. You would have to have strange hours for sure. But also, a lot of companies will want you to at least meet on occasion for meetings and things, and then you're having to fly in from a long distance to be somewhere. I think your best bet is being upfront. I've never tried to hide it, but I think,
Oh, you're
if they
so
don't
honest.
they don't ask, don't tell, that could work. But I think, yeah, that's tricky to do. But there are significant. When I came to Europe, the euro to dollar was about 1.5. So each dollar, each euro was worth $1.5. And now that has changed dramatically. And the cost of living in Spain is a lot cheaper, but the salaries are a lot lower here. For the same job, you're probably making somewhere between a half to a quarter of what you would make for the same job in the States. So
Yeah.
those are, there are some challenges living in Europe for sure,
I wonder
but
why that
there's a lot of
is,
reward here too.
that people are making less money. You know why that
What's
might
that?
be? Why are people making less money? Is it just there's more people or more taxes?
It's a lot of things, I think, but I haven't seen a lot of the salaries just haven't seemed to increase. I make similar to what I made 10 years ago in Spain. I don't see the salaries have really not increased much here. And I think it's a function of partly a cultural function, because the people don't seem to change jobs very often here. And if you stay with the same company, your salaries tend to stay pretty flat, 1 or 2% extra per year for inflation. But staying in the same position, you're probably not going to get a big salary raise. But I think there are some other economic influences here that have kept Spain, particularly Spain, I think is behind a bit in terms of the salary. But the cost of living is much cheaper here. The problem is if you're saving for retirement, if you put away 50% of your salary in the bank every year, or whatever it is, 20% of your salary in the bank every year for retirement. Here, 20% of 50,000 is a lot less than 20% of 100,000. Whatever your disposable income tends, with a smaller chunk for retirement for sure. And if you were to spend your whole time in the US, your whole working career in the US, what you end up saving is significantly more than what you would save in a country where you're making far less. So I think that just may limit you when you're ready to retire and where you're able to live. But then again, it's hard to compare systems, because the system over here, healthcare and education and even the retirement system, is just very different. It's a different concept here. So there are some benefits to that as well that can work out if you're planning to make a long-term move somewhere. But yeah.
Yeah. So obviously you like it because you're still there. I guess you're married to a European, so that kind of helps keep you there. Do you ever think about moving back, or?
No, not really. I think, my family's still in California and I visit occasionally. Still have a lot of good friends there, and I'm definitely well tied to the US culture. I feel connected there, like it or not.
How many
But
languages do you speak? Do you speak German and Spanish?
I can order a beer in 5 different languages, but speaking
Well,
fluently with any kind of fluency, probably just Spanish and English. I think maintaining more than two languages is a challenge. My wife speaks three languages all day long, and that's impressive. That's not something that's easy to maintain. And I think you have to grow up with that capacity. And certainly a lot of Europeans are able to do that. And it's definitely one of the challenges of living in Europe or anywhere where the native language is not your native tongue. It's a challenge for sure. It's a continual struggle to
So in the US right now, there's
communicate.
anti-immigrant sentiment, things like that. How about where you are? Like, do you see people that are going like, Ryan is taking my job, and that's why the wages are less because Ryan and all these other people are coming to my country and, taking jobs. Are you stealing jobs?
I hope not. No, I think there is some sentiment, particularly in some of the places since COVID. I've seen some, it feels a little bit like San Francisco in the mid 90s, where we have a lot of money coming from other countries in and buying up property. And I think there's a big part of the problem stems from the housing. There's a bit of a housing crisis in Spain in general, and that has a historical precedence from the economic crisis that began back in 2010 or so, where you had this boom, this housing bubble, and there was a lot of companies that came in and built housing, and then a lot of that went bust. And those same companies have been hesitant to build more housing. And now, so there's a bit of a housing shortage combined with the fluency of the workplace now that allows for remote work. And so you get a lot of Europeans and people from the States that are coming in and buying up housing and putting it out on Airbnb. So this commoditization of housing here. And I think it's a matter of the government needs to step in and put some regulation on that so that the people that are living and working, the average wage in Malaga is somewhere around 25,000 euros a year. Mm-hmm. And then you take the average wage in Germany, which is probably 2 or 3 times that. They can easily afford to come and pay a lot more, and they can come down here and work and enjoy the low cost of living and nice weather and nice lifestyle while making a wage in Germany. And this is what's happening. And so there is a pushback, and I don't disagree with that. Maybe it's growing pains, but I think the government needs to recognize some of these trends and put some limits so that the people who are making the local wage can afford to live here as well. And I think that's important.
So I know you've done it, like where you were in America and then you got a job over there. Like, how did that work? And how would you recommend somebody that is in the solar industry in the US to go get a job in Europe? Like, how do you do the job search and how do you get somebody to sponsor you and all that?
I mean, in solar, again, it's tricky to be fully remote. These days, though, there are a lot of opportunities, if you look for them out there, that are offering, because especially for positions that are very hard to fill. So currently I'm working for a company called Recurrent Energy as a product manager for large scale battery energy storage systems. And
that's like all over the world is the projects you're working on, or just?
It's a global position, yeah. And these are hard positions to fill. And so if you find yourself in positions that are hard to fill and or job, like a lot of application engineering work that I originally came to Europe as an application engineer, requires a lot of travel, and they will often allow, these are kind of by nature remote jobs anyway. So I think those jobs are easier to find work. It helps to have a job or a vocation that is conducive to remote work.
So does your job with Recurrent, do they have an office in Spain?
Yeah, they have offices all over the world, but they have an office in Madrid. And that's where, in Spain, the majority of jobs are going to be concentrated in the big cities in Europe. And you can find sponsorship if you don't have the advantage of having a spouse from or family heritage from Europe, where you can easily pick up a working visa, then you can try to solicit for jobs online and get companies to sponsor you. And again, if you're uniquely qualified for jobs that are difficult to find locally. That's how I originally came here. I came here as what they call a subcontract, so I was subconded. In other words, they allowed me to work in Europe as an American employee. And that was a bit of a special circumstance, but then I expressed my desire to be here permanently, and they were happy to sponsor me from there to get a working visa. And,
So were you first working for Cylinder in the US and then transferred that way?
That's right.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
and there was a vacancy opened up. I mean, if you're interested in working, a lot of people do this. They work for big international companies with offices in places where you want to be. And then when work opens up, it's very easy to say, hey, I
Yeah.
have an interest in moving to Singapore or to Japan or to Australia and working from there. Is that possible? And often they're pretty open to.
So that sounds like a good way for somebody to do it. So you go up there, you look for a company that has business in all these different countries. So like if a company has business in Spain and the US and you're from the US, then you can get the US job for that company and then transfer.
Language skills help. All of that helps. English is pretty
Sure.
widely spoken as a business language. It's an important one. But if you have additional language capabilities, that's always makes you more attractive in those positions.
We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Sean White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSEAN, that's solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his heat spring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show.
Let's see. So you work for the company and then you transfer over there. So the NABCEP helps you get that initial job. Plus it's like something else sticking on your resume. But then another thing too is there's different codes and standards. So there's the National Electrical Code, but it doesn't happen over there. So what's the code over there and how was it switching? Because when I knew you, you didn't know about Spanish codes or German codes or anything like that. So how did you learn that? Was it difficult to like learn new country codes and all that kind of stuff? Sometimes I teach classes in different countries and I'll do some International Electrotechnical Commission, that's IEC or British Wiring Standard information on my slides. I'll put that on my slides and things like that. But how does that work for you?
It's a bit tricky, but like you said, the IEC is pretty well aligned with the NEC in the US. So those standards tend to be have parallels or have counterparts in the NEC and the IEC. So if one, chances are there are some differences and
like you use a blue wire for your neutral instead of a white one, those types of things.
Yeah, well, that's sure. And every country, honestly, that's the challenge of being in Europe, is every country has, we have widely accepted international standards such as the IEC that are pretty well paralleled with the NEC. But there are also local standards, and each country, you really have to know their local codes and the national codes. It depends on what your job requires too, because for my work, a lot of my work having a global scope, right now I mainly stick to the IECs, the international codes are the mainly pertinent codes that are at play for me. And, on occasion, I need to understand if I'm working with a SCADA system or an EMS system or something where I have to understand a very localized Italian code for the local grid compliance. Then I have to get in a little deeper and understand some of the local code. A lot of that is in the local languages, and you can translate via AI and various tools available. But mainly stick to these days the IEC and NEC, honestly, still is very relevant. I mean, the US solar market is still very important.
So are you still doing NEC stuff when you're over there?
I do occasionally, yeah. I mean, I don't work a lot in the US market, at least for my current position. But, over the years, I'm mainly working with international companies with a large, at least most of them have large portfolios or presence in the US. And so the US market is a really important market for almost any work in solar. Let's see what happens here in the coming years, but at least up till now, it's been really an important market. So understanding that the NEC and the relevant codes in the US and having deep ties to those kind of cultural aspects of business in the US is also it's a good selling point if you're trying to make a move, international move, to bridge that gap culturally. To be the representative American on the Spanish team doesn't hurt you. And I think that, at least in the past, was a strong selling point for me as well, and getting in some of these international positions.
Great. So you're using your immigrant status as a benefit.
That's right.
Immigrant American. And then, so all these different codes. So I guess from what I remember from making the slide deck on this, like some years ago, probably like over 10 years ago, that there was, in Europe, you have all these different countries and speaking different languages and wiring things all differently. And they tried to harmonize. So you could have the same toaster and air conditioner in Germany that you can in Spain and England and all the different countries. So I think there was something called Senelec. Does that sound familiar to you? And then they tried to harmonize amongst Europe. And then they came up with the IEC to make it a little bit more global. And the IEC is the International Electrotechnical Commission. So I don't think that the IEC really is just like, let's adopt this for wiring your house in Spain. I think they'll have like their own like Spanish version of that, or maybe I'm wrong. And another thing too, though, is I think you do utility scale stuff mostly. Is that right? Are you mostly doing utility scale? So since you're doing utility scale, then you're not in there like dealing with like the wiring the house kind of stuff. And utility scale for the US too is a lot different. And you're using the National Electrical Safety Code, not so much the NEC for that kind of stuff. And so do you know about, like, just for instance, Spain, what are they using to wire a house?
That's a good question. I don't actually know the answer to that. Like you said, I mostly work at the international level, and most of what I deal with is I really don't work much, even in my work in Spain. I've been working here since 2013 or so, really even before that, but had jobs at large corporations here since then. And really most of the work that I do tends to be very international because of language is an important thing, but there are people who are Spanish. Nobody wants to deal with an English speaking, non-native in terms of like selling a solar installation. They don't want to deal with somebody like me. I tend to work at a more international, higher level. Yeah. The application engineering work that I did as well we got into, I don't remember those codes back then. That was quite a while ago since I've worked at that specific of a level. But no, most of what I do these days is very high level testing standards, 61724, whatever
It's like the IEC number. Yeah.
The IEC, for performance engineering and BESS and things like this, where we have the equivalents of the 9540 UL testing and things like this that I will get into. But as far as actually doing wiring, that's probably more at the project level than it is really the product level. And I haven't had to deal with that much.
So just out of curiosity, you seem to have you're a white dude. What's your background? I'm European?
Yeah, I'm a mutt like most of us. My parents have European backgrounds. I think a lot of Irish, a lot of Irish and Welsh. Jones. I get the Welsh from my dad's side, and my grandmother was Margaret O'Connell. So we have a good amount of Irish and Welsh in me.
So
sure.
have you ever worked in Ireland?
I've never worked there. I've been there.
Uh-huh.
Fantastic country to visit. A
Yeah.
lot of great music and great beer, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was
Very
there not on my
friendly
way to
people.
Intersolar. Yeah. Yep. I have a good
Oh,
friend.
you stopped there on the way to Intersolar.
Yeah, it was kind of a sad story. I had a good friend who's an Apache guitar player singer, and he moved to Europe a long time ago. And we weren't staying in touch as often as we should. And then I talked to him, and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to surprise him and come see him on my way to the conference." He passed away after I like called up to go. Okay, I'm going to be there, and then like he died, and so felt bad. We used to sing and play guitar together and stuff. So I went and I visited with his son that I knew as a kid, and I went and hung out with his son and his wife, and we reminisced and stuff like that. But yeah, I've been to Ireland a number of times, and my first name is pretty Irish, I guess, like yours and all that kind of stuff. But it's interesting, it's like you're from there, but you can't go there and live there without some kind of work permit. So no matter how much Irish blood I have, I wonder if I could go like, here's my 23andMe or my Ancestry.com test. You got to take me back, or.
You can do it. You can do it. A lot of people do it. I think you have a short window of time, though. You only have until you're like 32 or something to claim your
Oh, yeah?
heritage and get your visa from it. Yeah, and it can only be one generation back. So
Oh, yeah.
if your mother was an Irish citizen,
Yeah,
and you
right.
have up to like age 32 to claim it.
Well,
Maybe
yeah,
for
I've got to go back
grandparents.
quite a few generations.
Yeah, I'd have to go back.
Huh.
Actually, my grandmother would qualify, but I blew that. I didn't move to Europe till I was in my
Yeah,
40s,
yeah, yeah.
so I couldn't claim that. It's not easy to get that visa. It's a bit of a trick, and then once you get it, you're tied to that job. So then if you want to change jobs, you got to go out and find another
Oh,
job. So
yeah.
your
It's like,
best bet is get a working visa sponsorship and then find a spouse who lives here.
yeah,
That's probably marry somebody who's from
uh-huh.
the country where you want to move. That's probably your best bet.
Yeah.
But otherwise, you can start a company too, which is
Oh, yeah.
a great
Yeah,
way
and what
to
do they
get
call
in.
them? Like golden visas or something, where there's some countries where you just pay money. Was
Yeah,
Portugal's famous for that, I think? Where you just,
if you're got enough money in your bank account and you can prove it.
right.
I forget what it is. Every country is a little different, but you got a couple $1,000,000 in the bank, you can probably get that.
Yeah, all these listeners here have that, of course. And
Of
yeah, and it
course.
seems very similar too to somebody wanting to work here from another country. But then we go through different waves. So we have like some administrations or people running the government are more open to bringing on foreign workers, but especially people that are smart, we need them. Like to make the economy go and make Googles and stuff like that.
Yeah, if you're looking to come here and you don't have anything to offer, then you're probably not going to get very far.
Yeah.
But if you come here with something to offer, particularly something that, is in high demand, and you got special skills, then I think it's not terribly difficult. You can
I
find your
think with
way.
a lot of things in life, if you're persistent, you'll get it. You'll figure it out. Like getting the
I
NABCEP
agree.
certification or something like that. Like some people are like, oh, I don't qualify for this. And they just give up. And then there's other people like, I'm going to figure out how to qualify. There's a will, there's a way. There's all these other people that have it. I'm going to have it. If it takes
You
some
don't have to think
experience.
that far in advance. I'm making a move to another country, moving to Canada from the US, okay. Moving to another country, especially something far away from friends and family, it speaks another language and requires visas and different work skill sets. This is not trivial. You got to take it step by step. I mean, I don't think I had ever planned to come here and stay in Europe. When I first moved here, I thought, come here for a few months, see how it goes. And I liked it, so I stay a little longer. Maybe I stay here for a year or two. And then things happen. You meet your love of your life and you end up staying. But it happens over time. And I think you kind of got to take an opportunity and you see where it leads. I think for people who are adventurous and want to try different things and, you're It's not for everybody. I think it can, and different people want different things out of it, out of the travel experiences. Some want to just float around for a couple years. Some want to make a big change and make it permanent and for whatever motivation. Yeah. So it really depends. There's a lot of reasons people do it. It's not without its challenges, like I said. But the rewards are great too. I feel like every day, I've been doing this for 16 years or something. And still feel like every day is just just walking down the street is an adventure because there's new things to discover all the time. And for me, learning another language is learning another culture. It's a new way of communicating. It's a new way of seeing the world. And so while it has its challenges, it's also really, for me, really satisfying and a lot of fun. It's not for everybody, but it works for me.
Yeah. And I think some people do the digital nomad thing where they don't stay in a place long enough where they would have to pay taxes. They just go, okay, I'm going to go to this country and I'm going to go to that country. And I have a friend that I went to college with, and he was like, I'm going to ride my motorcycle across Europe. And that was like decades ago, and I think he's still doing it. Maybe it's not a motorcycle.
I did that in 1995. I rode a motorcycle across Europe.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
That was a blast. Highly recommend it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember we had a study group when we studied for our NABCEP certification exam, and the other guy was Dave Harris, and he did that. He took a motorcycle around the U.S., I guess.
Yeah. He was a big motorcycler too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember. He liked those big bikes, the big Goldwings. I remember.
Yeah, he's probably still on one right now. I've got a motorcycle license.
You got a motorcycle license?
Yeah, I can ride one. I used to have a bike, but I've never gone on any big long trips. I think the longest I went on is I was living in Alaska, and I put on a ship, and it showed up over at Bellingham, which is pretty much Seattle, and I rode it down to California, and then I rode it to Las Vegas and back.
Oh, that's a good trip.
That's the extent of my motorcycle trips. Nothing like across Europe or anything like that.
I've been all over the world on bikes, and I grew up, I didn't have a car until I was in my 40s. I just lived on bikes. I think that's the way to go because it's a different mentality. It's like you ride a bike, it's a different mentality than driving a car. And I think the problem with a lot of, myself included, I think when I switched to a car, that's when I got my first really rough accident. And I think my head just was in two different, on the bike. Because I wasn't riding the bike permanently. I would switch. I would go, sometimes I'd ride the bike, sometimes I'd ride the car. And I think mentally that just distracted me too much. It was too hard to switch because your head just has to be in a whole different place when you're riding, especially like I was living in San Francisco and riding big bikes, a 1200cc tour sport bike, and things come at you very fast, and you really have your head in a whole different place. Driving a car is much more passive.
I remember there's this solar install that I did. So it was like I was teaching classes, and there was this attorney in my class who just thought solar was cool, and he took a solar class, and we became friends, and you want to install solar in my house? And I just gave him an hourly price. And we agreed upon it. And he had a ladder at his house. And I would just show up with my backpack, and I have like tools and stuff in it. And all the solar equipment was just delivered to the house. So I pretty much did a solar install off a motorcycle. So it's pretty cool. Yeah. That's
great. Yeah. You've been around a long time doing this stuff too. I remember taking your class back in 2008 or 2009 from one of the community colleges down in California.
DVC. I guess that's where we met too. Yeah.
You've been doing this quite a while yourself. When did you first get into solar?
My first job in the solar industry was a protester. My friend wrote this law called community choice aggregation. So in the mid 90s, we were like making signs and stuff like that. And then I did a little bit of technical research for him. And so I was on that end. And then also my dad had property up in the Sierras, and we had a little real good system up there that was Arco solar modules and stuff like that. But then my first full-time job in the industry was in 2008.
Okay, so about the same time as me.
Yeah, and then after that happened, it just took off from there. It was like somebody was like, oh, we're teaching this class and we need help. And then I helped them, and then everybody wanted me to teach classes. And that's how I evolved. I didn't know I was going to teach solar classes. It just happened to me. Yeah, things happen. You didn't know you were going to be in Europe. It happened to you, huh?
Yeah, sometimes you just have to put things in your path and take the opportunity when it comes.
Yeah.
See where it leads.
Cool,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. So let's see. Any other stuff that you want to talk about? This is a good way to catch up too, since we haven't really had a big long conversation in a long time, because I see at those big conferences and there's so much happening there. So it's good to catch up.
I've seen
with
you twice at the Intersolar show. I saw you back in 2000. I don't even remember what year it was, but it was maybe 10 years ago. It was quite a while ago. I was really surprised to see you there. I remember the first time. And then what are the chances that, how many people go to that show? Something like,
I know, a lot. We've probably both been there.
Tens of thousands.
We've probably both been there many times. So this time, let's text each other and we'll catch up.
Yeah, let's do it. I haven't been so consistent going there in recent years, but I went for, I think it was a good 10 years in a row that I was there, from like 2009 to 2019 or
that was me too. And then probably
consistent.
me too. And then after COVID, I didn't go as much, and then started going again.
Yeah, that's a long trip from California. Do you go out there just for the conference, or do you go do other things while you're here?
That time, I was doing it to, I also went by Ireland, but it was the main thing I wanted to go. And then I've got a good friend in Germany, and so I would oftentimes go and stay with him for a while too and hang out. Bring in some cool solar t-shirts.
Yeah. It's good to play both sides of the pond.
Yeah.
I get a lot of, I still have friends and family in the US. And actually with my previous job, I had a special deal where I was spending half of my time in Florida and half of my time in Spain, which was a nice mix. It was a little hard being away from home for 6 months, but it was also a lot of fun. And I had complete flexibility on how many. I just had to spend a total of 6 months where I was a tax resident in the US. So I had to spend a total of 183 days in the US. But I had complete flexibility on, when I spent my time there. So I spend the winters in southern Florida and come back to Spain for the rest of the year. It wasn't a bad gig. I did that for a couple of years. And it's nice to have that. There's things about both places that are really
So
great.
did that make it, you didn't have to have all the paperwork for working in Europe?
I already have
your
all
time
the
in the US?
paperwork for being in Europe, having been here for so long, and my wife is European. So I have all of the required visas there. And as a US citizen, I didn't need anything for the US. It just gets tricky with the taxes because you have to be a tax resident somewhere. The US government finds you, even unless you renounce your US citizenship, the US government, if you make more than a certain amount, it's over.
You dare me to renounce mine right now? I renounce. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I wish it was that easy. Unfortunately, you got to give up your passport and give up all your rights as a U.S. citizen, and you're no longer a U.S. citizen. So I don't think I'm ever going to renounce my U.S. citizenship and become a European citizen. Probably would not make sense for me to do that. But I'm pretty happy here. I don't have any. I got a pretty good setup here. It's taken me a long time to get to where I'm at now, but I'm really enjoying life here. It's very different, but like I said, it can be a lot of fun.
In southern Spain, are you just like right at the bottom? Are you towards Portugal? Are you a little bit more to the east?
So I'm on the coast in Malaga, what they call the Gold Coast. And the Gold Coast is a little north of here, but the Costa del Sol is, Malaga is about in a car drive to the very tip of the Iberian Peninsula. You're looking at about 2-hour drive down the coast, and you'll be at the very southernmost tip of Europe.
Cool.
Which is actually in Portugal somewhere, I think the very southernmost tip, but it's pretty close. You get down to Tariffs, is right on the very tip where the mouth of the Mediterranean opens up to the Atlantic. So we're pretty far south. It's from Barcelona. It would take you a good 8 to 10 hours by car. So to get down here, it's pretty similar to Southern California,
Great.
where I'm from. I think climate-wise, it's pretty similar. It's a little more humid here in the summers, and we have long nights, and it's a very late culture here. So especially in the summer, we don't typically eat dinner till 10, 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
And people are out.
Do you take your siesta today?
No, I don't usually do a siesta, although
I'm about ready for one. Yeah.
a lot of people swear by it.
I think it's healthy.
But
Yeah.
I think
Cool.
it's usually from after lunch, which is about 4 o'clock, is when siesta is sort of 2 to 6 o'clock, I think, is about when things shut down. And then they reopen again from 6 to 10. So you got half the day in the morning, early afternoon. And I think it's mainly so people can kind of go home for lunch and be with family and escape the heat of the day. And then things reopen again later at night. People go out again later in the evening. It's too hot in the middle of the day. Go out. It kind of makes a lot of sense, really.
Okay.
That siesta, you're not supposed to take it for like a 25-minute nap. Anything more than 25 minutes and it kind of ruins you because you don't wake up refreshed, you wake up tired.
Yeah.
But, that 25-minute, somewhere around 25 minutes
Even
for
5,
a quick nap is a good refreshing.
Sometimes
You
1
recharge the
minute, just
batteries.
chilling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, man. It was great to connect with you at Inner Solar and catch up with you again here today.
Let's do it
a bit.
again.
Yeah,
So-
for sure. For
Thanks.
sure. I'll let you know next time I'm in the States. Maybe 3+. I assume you go to that as well, huh?
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Ryan Jones, who is NABCEP certified. He was my NABCEP study buddy when we were studying for the NABCEP exam. I remember doing it from my apartment in Oakland. And if you don't have your NABCEP certification yet, you better be like Ryan and get your NABCEP certification, and it will take you around the world. And thanks for listening to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. To learn more, get yourself NABCEP certified, go to SolarSEAN, that's SolarSEAN.com, because a NABCEP certification will smooth out the roller coaster. You can be nomadic. You can do solar jobs from the moon. You can do your solar job anywhere, especially southern Spain would be a good place to do your solar job. So thanks a lot, Ryan, and woo!